actual violent crime totals. Some of this is what was presented most recently to the safety committee for city council. So they have had this too. So you're seeing this after they've been provided it. And these are alarming numbers too. If you can see, what you're looking at here is violent crime, which includes ag assaults all the way down to homicide and rape. And you see those numbers. If we look specifically at 2019, 2020, we're increasing almost in every category. There's a few that are down, but unfortunately we're on the rise. Shootings within the city may not have ultimately resulted in any deaths. We've had those increase as well. And so if you've kind of seen any of the news releases, the PIO is trying to do her best in transparency to show how many of these shots fired calls we're going to. And then unfortunately, the time it's taking us to get there because of the staffing issues we have. Next, please. So what you see here is exactly what I said. We've surpassed that 5-year high. The number of people that have been shot here in the city in 2020, we've increased. So 10 of those were fatal in 2020, not numbers that we want to see. From a perspective of living here as well as visiting here, this is not something that any of us within the department or the city want to see increase. Next, sir. So the community engagement team was formed when we were fully staffed. My unit is supposed to have a total of 15 officers in it. Myself and Captain Lamb run the unit. I have one sergeant, and I'm supposed to have a total of 15 within that group to cover all of the CRO duties. So many of you know your community resource officers have been cut and or you don't have one right now. Unfortunately, if I get an additional, I'll have 3. So my staffing for all of the neighborhoods and businesses when it comes to engagement with the police department from a community perspective, I've got 3 officers and a sergeant, and they're working hard. They, along with Captain Lamb and myself, attend all of the meetings. We try right now. It's been fortunate that we are Zoom and Google because we can get to more of them than we would if it was in person. And then we also have to obviously keep the city council updated as well. But we have tried additional ways that is at our disposal. And you see some of them here, the various Facebook and Twitter, as well as an email address that we have. All of these platforms are monitored, and our community engagement team does the very best along with our PIOs to try to reach the community questions and concerns, as well as, I'm sure here shortly, I'll explain some other ways that you can anonymously call in various tips. Next, please. So this dashboard, as you see, is just another avenue that the chief has tried to extend to our citizens and business to be as transparent as possible. We've had a significant number of views on that page since we put it out, but if you haven't been there, that information's on the bottom, and I think I heard that was going to be shared on your website, so you guys will have full access to that. But this would give you all that information that you probably normally have to go to a couple other platforms to get, but this is showing you all at once. All of our crime data, use of force data, which shows show of force and use of force. So I can be specific in that. We're now tracking anytime an officer actually shows force, not just the instances in which he uses force. That's important just because there has been numerous community complaints as far as what they felt was an excessive force, but it didn't rise to that level of officers actually going hands-on. So in this instance, we are actually tracking that data. And then that's also followed up with our body cam footage, car video footage. And so we have all of that. So this dashboard is just one other tool that the chief has tried to put out there to be as transparent as possible with the public. Next, please. The tip to APD. So this is a tip line that individuals can actually submit anonymously their tips via the app. The watch commander, as I explained, that's my job. It's a lieutenant. There's a watch commander on at all times in the city, and it's their job to actually pull up those tips, distribute those tips to the specialized units that need them, and or assign those to officers to follow up on. And then they have a way to, through the app, to actually speak back to the tipster without me ever knowing who they are or names or phone numbers. It's all anonymous, and we can talk back and forth and have a conversation via text. And it's actually been extremely helpful. We've had a significant number of tips. And we hope more and more people download this app because it's been beneficial to us. Next, please. So this just, and I'm glad that you said that you have this on your website, because this is just one easy way for you to find and how to put this onto your actual phone. And so if you have this on your website, you'll always have this to reference to. It is not difficult by any means, but we encourage as many people as possible to utilize it. And I think you have one over section for me.
That's all I've got.
Okay. Let me see if I can pull up one other thing to help with a few other questions, and then I will. So the only other thing that I think Captain Lamb wanted me to try to present is just giving you an idea of some of the stuff that we're actually functioning on. I can't get this one over to you because it's not in the right format for me to present from my screen, but I'll go through it very quickly for us. It just describes the various community meetings that we've been attending, as many as we can. And then it actually is going to address some of our primary community concerns. This was just what was presented to the actual safety committee board. And the largest concern right now is homeless issues within the city. Next to that has been drug activity, and that's followed up by parking concerns. So we can kind of give a good idea, and my numbers may be off, so please don't quote me, but the majority of our homeless camps that we are hearing about and complained about, are 71% of them are found on private property. The DOT has over 8 to 10%, and then the remaining is city property. So the city property is a very low number. If you've kind of been watching the news and seen what's happened here lately, this has been kind of a sticking point for what we can do and what the law says we must do when it relates to private property versus city and DOT property. The chief then reiterated a little bit on our recruitment efforts, as well as some of the significant resignation issues that we had. The other thing that I know that Captain Lamb wanted me to be able to stress and then answer questions about is our response times. Moreover, so that you kind of knew, hearing from us, what's happening here. But that other slide that showed priority calls for service, which essentially is everything you can think of as the worst thing that could happen, from an airplane crash to a bank robbery to a homicide to gunshot wounds. Currently, calls for service are 45% down, and that's because of the COVID time that we're in. The issue is response times for officers getting to those priority one calls have increased by 2 minutes. And that is a lot. Best way for me to lay it out without being too dramatic is if somebody breaks into your house and you call the police, whatever time it took for us to get there anyways, add 2 minutes to that. And 2 minutes is a long time. So this is an unacceptable number, and we need to get this number down. Doing so, we have to be unique in the way that we go about distributing our officers. So if anybody has followed as well, we have shut down one whole district, and that's the downtown office that used to be on Haywood. There is no longer police officers residing in that office. The chief has consolidated, and we now have 3 districts. We're hoping that's not going to continue, and we can maintain the officers we have. But with the call times, we have to reprioritize what calls were going on and what officers we're sending. So we have redistributed those officers within the David district, which is south, and Central, which is downtown. And then we have Adam district, which is west, and Baker district, which is east. Our hope is that we maintain that, but unfortunately we just don't know based on what we have. And so I can give you an idea of what we've done. We've taken some of the detectives out of that division and we put them back on patrol. Unfortunately, we were forced to reduce our school resource officers from 5 covering all the schools to 3. We've assigned cars to only take report calls. That's so that any of these cold calls that are coming in that don't need an actual officer in person, they can take those over the phone. And then we save that officer being out of service. And then we've eliminated all bike and foot patrols citywide. We have tried to improve response times, and that's our effort to use police to citizen reporting, which means you can report your calls that are non-emergency online. We reassigned officers off of specialized units. We're using data-driven deployment, and then we're, as watch commanders and supervisors, triaging calls And unfortunately, some calls aren't going to get answered for a significant period of time because of other higher priority calls. The last portion of that slide of which he gave to them was ultimately his plans moving forward. And a lot of that is based on reducing the violent crime. That's what his current focus is at this time. And I don't have more on those slides, but I'm happy. I know I threw a lot at you really fast. I apologize. I speak really fast too, but hopefully that opened up more time for questions, and I'll take and try to answer anything I can.
Okay, who's got questions? Wendy.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate your presentation. I do have a question. Is it possible to have the list of crimes that you have, from homicide, rape, robbery armed, and a robbery common law, the number of victims shot, and use that data and incorporate the zip code areas?
That is probably already been done. We have two criminal analysts, and I am pretty sure between Ed and Doug, they probably have those numbers. I don't, but I can get them. And then I can definitely share them so you can share that. So let me make sure I specifically know you want to see how that crime is broken down by zip code.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
I will work on it.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Catherine?
Go ahead.
Catherine? About a year and a half ago, West Asheville had seen a large increase of crimes. A lot of them may have been property crimes, drug crimes. We had community meetings. Officers had been reallocated to West Asheville to work on that. How is the situation now?
So we currently, West Asheville has not lost any officers for any reallocation. They have lost officers due to resignations, but what we have done is use that data-driven policing and use the calls for service that we have, and we've put out the officers in each district based on those calls. So specifically what was done before, and I know what you're referencing, it's being done different now. We're looking at the city as a whole, the amount of calls in each district, and then where we put those officers. And it's not just based on today and that shift, it's based on how we're seeing those call volumes rise. So peak times calls for service, more officers are in that area. I hope that kind of answers what you're asking.
Thank you.
Grace.
I was wondering how the situation is in other similar communities across North Carolina, as far as having officers, the number of officers going down.
So nationwide,
Yeah.
post June time, we saw a decrease across the nation and North Carolina with officers leaving that public service. Unfortunately, we know of no other jurisdiction in the state, and I don't know of any more in the country that have lost as many officers as we have.
Oh.
So with it being the number, and obviously we can't do anything about those that are going to retire. We wish them well. We would love for them to stay. They have done their time. In North Carolina, it's a 30-year retirement. So with that being said, recruitment efforts, and the chief has kind of said this, and he doesn't say this to be smart in his comments, but he has asked numerous folks, what would you like me to put on a recruiting poster? Because we don't necessarily have the best environment right now to recruit people to work for us. So we need to change that. And that's what he's trying to do. And it's not just money. I think a lot of the officers get upset when they think that most of the citizens they're serving think they're just looking for more money. So they want to hit the road and find it somewhere else. While that is true, they need to support their family. Our guys start at $36,000 a year. Anybody who was hired after 2012 will not have medical benefits upon retirement. So anybody who was here prior to that will get their medical benefits if they spend a full 30 within the city. It's hard to bring on an individual and hope that they will stay with the organization, because we also spend a lot of money training these individuals. It takes about a year to get them through their BLET and then their post training and then their field training, and then we lose them. And we lose them to other organizations that is taking benefit of our training we're putting into these folks. So we've kind of got to stop that. And some of that is on the city to figure out from a financial end. And then some of that has to be, and I say this because it's me as well, as a community, and I employ my neighborhood, we have to do more so that these officers know we do need you. There has been, I think the best thing I can say is what I tell my own son. You know, we don't always like everybody we work with. Whether you work at Walmart, Waffle House, or the police department, there are going to be some people you don't like. We do our best to weed those people out. And unfortunately, media will show you we don't always get them. However, I also remind him that when a doctor does something horrible, we don't turn our nose to the whole profession because we need our doctors. That one doctor did something pretty horrible, and we handled that situation, whatever that may be, loss of license or prison time. But unfortunately, our society has kind of taken the notice that if one officer does something wrong, they're all that way. And that's not the truth. And I think the more we support the officers that are here, because I can tell you the majority of the officers that are here, they do care about this community. I know of only 2 police officers that reside and own a home in the city limits of Asheville. That's not okay. It's hard to embrace community-oriented policing when we can't get them in the communities. So I think we have to think of different ways and outside of the box ideas of what we do to employ bringing that back. And I think that takes all the communities as well as internally within the city and the police department, not to be stuck in the ways that we've always done it. We've got to kind of do things different. Sorry, that was long. I hope that answered your question.
Okay, I see Wendy has another.
Yes, thank you very much, Captain. I have another thought when you were telling me about the salary that the police officers are receiving of $36,000 a year. I think it would be more important for you to state how much they're making an hour. It's $17.31 an hour.
That's correct.
And so I think by breaking that down a little bit more would probably be more beneficial. I'd like to see that increased, of course, all of us would. And so I think it would be really great when you're speaking to talk about hourly rate. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's a very good point. It hurts to say that number. At my rank, I make more money and I'm okay, but we really fight for these guys that are coming in at this rate. They're young, they're starting families. I think everybody here knows it's really tough on that salary. So it's not that they're money hungry and they just think they're worth more. We just need to get them the right livability and the right wage. So that is a part of it. And I think the other part that we can do without council's help is just supporting them.
Well, and just being able to be a police officer in the city of Asheville and not being able to live in the city is another component to this.
You're right.
Okay, anybody else? I don't see any hands waving. Mr. Michael Lewis, please unmute. Anybody else while Mike is trying to find it? There he is.
There we go. I've got to find the right mute button. I just want to say that I've been a real critic of the APD in years past. However, I've known some really fine officers, really fine people. And you have my support and my thoughts and my prayers because you've got a really tough job. And we as a community need to support you, not turn a blind eye to bad things, but we need to support you.
Well, thank you, sir.
Just hold on a minute, Wendy. I want to see if anybody else. Is there anybody, since Wendy's been in twice, anybody looking for an opportunity? And I'm going to let Wendy in, and then I think I'm going to let Lieutenant Moore go. So go ahead, Wendy.
Lieutenant Moore, I have one other question, and hopefully this will be my last one. When you're doing an exit interview with your police officers, are you inquiring as to the reasons for their departure?
Yes, ma'am. So we have done exit interviews, and I am not privy to what they're saying in those. Those are done with the deputy chief, but what I'm hearing and what we get back from the chief is similar to what I've shared with you, that we really know. At a lieutenant rank, I've kind of moved beyond that ability to see officers every day, but the sergeants are in touch with them every day, and that's kind of their boss on the daily basis. And the sergeants report back that we've got a lot of guys, unfortunately, that are 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and they're waiting for job offers from other locations. So unfortunately, we're expecting numerous more resignations. What they're telling in their exit interview is similar. Pay, obviously, is one, but also support, not just from the community, but internally. They're looking for additional support from their bosses, from their chief level officers. And they want to see that support in kind of different ways. Number one, being visible. And that's been a complaint of some of theirs, that they want to see them more. So that's things that we can do as executive level officers to make their daily function a little bit better. So we're working on that. But it's hard when they go, and a lot of them are open and honest with us. They're going to Henderson County for a job, or they're going to Buncombe County for a job now, which if anybody knows, Buncombe County increased their starting pay. They're at $42,000 a year. So it's really hard when you're already underneath that level, and we're losing people to go over there, and they can take school resource function roles. They can go straight to the detective division. There's lots of places they can go. And, I don't fault Sheriff Miller. I worked for him for many years when he was here, and it would behoove him to take very highly trained officers who want to come over. So I can't be mad at him for it. However, we got to find a way to keep them from going. And we're hearing what they're saying. That's being communicated to council and the safety committee, but there's not much action. And I'll just share a side note, and then I'll give the meeting back to you. I actually kind of had a little civic lesson with my son 2 weeks ago, because I told him I had my earbud in and I was on the council meeting for 4.5 hours, and I had signed up as a city taxpayer to speak. And I spent the entire time at dinner, during bedtime, and then after he was already asleep, waiting for my chance to talk, and I never got let in the meeting. So to me, I was going to speak specifically to violent crime, not as a police officer, but as a citizen, that this is something we do have to focus on. We can't act like it's not happening. And I never got the chance to talk. So I don't know what I learned from that, other than now I know why a lot of people in the city, there's 99,000 residents, only 15 to 20 get on to speak every council meeting. So as a citizen, not as a police officer, I implore you, if you have something and you think council needs to hear it, please tell them.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And we appreciate you being here. And, since you're on call, we won't be sad if you have to get off the line.
I will stay on as long as I can. And if there's any other questions for myself or Captain Lamb, our information should be on that as well. And we're happy to try to help any way we can. You can reach out at any time.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. I think we're doing fairly well. Let me get back to the agenda here for a second. Okay, so Sharon, you're up next. Where is she? There she is. So let me put up your document and make it a little bit bigger. Everybody see that okay? All right, take it away, Sharon. Unmute, please. There you go.
Sorry. Hey, everybody. Sharon. I'm the chair of the Committee on Development Advocacy. We call ourselves CODA. We decided to form this committee due to the fact that there's a lot of neighborhood questions regarding some of the developments that are coming up. And so we formed this committee, and we have met twice, and we will meet again on the 1st. And we have chosen certain developments that have created more controversy than some of the others. And this is a short overview of how we've dealt with the different developments that have come up and what we have done and where we have going and what the completion is on it. I mean, I don't know how much time we have, but I'll just go over the Charlotte and East Chestnut mixed use development that we're working with the executive director, the Preservation Society, and letting them take the lead. We're offering them technical support and drafting letters. We're in the process of having a letter now. They go to technical review committee on Monday, and we are thinking that the design is going to change. So we're probably going to table that letter till we find out whether they're going to submit any significant design changes before we submit the letters. Also, the meeting is about who are the letters going to go to other than council, city manager. Do we want to send our letters out to like ACT and of course, all the membership on CAN. And then Inca Tower, they contacted us regarding how to save the tower. We gave them technical support and offered to help them reorganize as a neighborhood association. They were once a neighborhood association, and now they're kind of loosely formed just to try to save the tower, which did get saved. We have Ashland project that we involved ourselves with the neighborhood and then the reparations side of the community. And we have drafted a letter on that we were going to send out, and then council pulled that from the agenda. That's number 3. And we expect it to return. So we will, when that comes back, we will see how the iteration of that comes back and then come up with how the community wants us to deal with that. Then we discussed how we could fit in with development with Buncombe County. Most of us on this committee, other than Barber, know very little about Buncombe County. Barbara's offered to step up and fill us in on how Buncombe County works, but it would be really great on this committee if we could get somebody that is in Buncombe County and is willing to delve into their ordinances. I don't even know if they call them ordinances. And so we can have another member and we can reach out to the neighborhoods for helping out Buncombe County where they need the help. With the bluffs on Riverbend and Woodfin, another letter went out, an email went out to 2 people that are in opposition, and we sent out that we'd be glad to help them and advise of organizing for a neighborhood association in the area. And they emailed back saying that thank you for the help, but we have not heard from them. Then there is a new project coming up in 70 Mills Gap that is overly dense for the area, and it's got a lot of issues. We talked about how to do with new developments and who is the neighborhood association located in this area. And then urban centers, which is actually Urban Place, is involving Patton Avenue, South Tunnel, Merriman, and how phase 1 is going to P&Z 3, and we need to send a letter out by 3/1 to P&Z because they're increasing the height of these mixed use that's going to be an urban overlay, going to be an overlay district, how they're removing a lot of the green infrastructure and to allow more density, and they're removing buffering requirements between single family residents and multifamily. So the neighborhoods are going to be concerned with these that are butting up against to our established neighborhoods. So those are some of the problems or issues that we've dealt with so far. And we're always looking for other people that want to join us. We try to keep our meetings within an hour and try to be equitable all the way around, but to get our message across that a lot of what's building and going on in development in the city is not sustainable for our neighborhoods. And that's my report.
I'd take maybe 1 or 2 questions now, and then let's save the rest for the end if anybody's got any questions for Sharon. Grace.
Catherine?
Okay,
Oh.
hang on, Catherine. I'm gonna let Grace go first and then you'll be next.
Okay, yeah, this is regarding the Charlotte and Chestnut development. It sounds like, what I gather is that CAN has taken the position opposing the development. And it's sort of taking the lead from the Preservation Society. And I'm wondering, did CAN have the opportunity to meet with the developers and look at the pros and cons?
Yes.
How did they make that decision? How did it?
We made the decision on consensus of our committee. We are not against development ever. We are just against this type of development. I'm also on the technical review committee with
Right.
and I get all the staff reports, and I have 5 pages pretty much of how this does not meet a whole lot of the criteria of the UDO. So what we do is we take a look and see how much of the project, along with the neighborhood's concerns. We've attended all the meetings. We've looked at all the plans, and we decided that there was too much criteria in this particular development that did not meet the UDO as it stands. If they had talked with the neighborhood more and complied with what the neighborhood wanted, and even complied with the UDO requirements as the city is requiring, we may have made a different decision. But we made the decision on what was submitted so far. That's why we held off our letter, waiting to see on their submittal on March 1st TRC to see if they're going to comply with some of the requirements that the city is asking them to do. And we will hold back our comments on that till we hear what they have to say.
Yeah, well, good. When you said the committee voted on it, was that the CAN board or your development committee?
Our development committee, and I'm a board member. And what we do is we send, before we send letters out, we send it through the executive committee, and then have that reviewed, and then send it through if there's any questions. But pretty much on this site, on the neighborhood associations, and there's 4 of them that we're working with, the consensus is we want development, but not this particular development. So we, as the neighborhood, involving ourselves with the neighborhood, will take the consensus of the neighborhood.
Okay, well, thank you for the.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Okay, Catherine?
Hi, Sharon. Thank you for what you're doing. So is the Preservation Society approaching any of this potential development to move the houses or anything?
They've got a website. Thank you for the question. They have a website. All the houses are proposed to be demolished along with all the trees, except for a few, and the few trees that are on there will not make it. So pretty much the whole area is going to be taken down. And the Preservation Society has I'm sorry to include the website on that. And they discuss about what the development looks like and what the project is. But as of today, all the houses are coming down that are part of that development, all the historic houses, as well as all of the old trees.
That's pretty bad.
We thought so. That's why we voted the way we did. We're hoping that they will reconsider what the neighbors want and the neighborhood, and we're hoping for some consensus. We can only hope.
All right, thanks for the questions. Thanks, Sharon. I'm gonna keep moving us along so that we have some open question time at the end. So if you really wanted to get in, please hang with us. And as always, many of us would stay late if there was questions and conversations. So I'm gonna turn the next one over to Patrick.
Good evening. I'm Patrick Gilbert. I am the Vice President for Government Relations and Chair of the Government Relations Committee. I think that included in the agenda that was sent out, everybody had a link to the most recent Government Relations Committee report. I won't go into the details of everything. You can read the report, and if you have any questions, either later in the meeting or after the meeting, you can feel free to email me. I would be glad to answer your questions. Just point out that the Government Relations Committee is in negotiations with different city staff over proposed changes to the UDO. The one thing that is most immediate on our agenda is our efforts to change UDO language related to neighborhood notification of impending developments. Currently, the UDO just requires the developer, as part of the pre-application process, to hold a meeting with neighbors who own property within 200 feet adjacent to the development. We are proposing to amend that and require that the developer and/or city notify the neighborhood association on register of the city list of neighborhoods of impending developments, and hold a community-wide meeting on that development, as well as other particular details of that general process. And this is the first in a series of negotiations that we're hoping to have with the city that will increase the overall neighborhood input into development projects as it relates to the UDO. So that is my report, and I will be glad to answer any questions now or any questions later that you have.
Questions now?
Catherine?
Go ahead, Catherine.
Hey, Patrick, thank you. What is for the neighborhoods that are not well organized, to have a 200-foot notification boundary is really maybe only 1 or 2 levels in around a large potential development. And a lot of people still haven't signed up for that portal. So is there any chance that the city would consider a wider boundary of notification in lieu of these, a recognized neighborhood association?
So,
like say 400 instead of 200.
So that's a good question. We're not discussing the extent of the notification boundary. What we're saying is that if there is an impending development, let's say in Hall Creek or in Grove Park, Sunset Mountain, that the developer must, and/or city, must then notify the neighborhood association within those communities, which would be the Hall Creek Community Association or the Grove Park Sunset Mountain Neighborhood Association, of a pending development, and that there would be then a neighborhood-wide meeting in which the developer would present his or her development plans to that neighborhood and receive feedback from that neighborhood on those impending plans. So it goes much.
Patrick,
Yep.
I apologize. I understand what you're saying in regards to that, but when you look at the overlay map with neighborhoods, there are large swaths of the community that have no organized neighborhood. And perhaps getting a boundary increase might be a secondary way of trying to get increased notification in order to get some community involvement.
So,
See you, Barbara. Let Patrick answer first, and then I'll get to you.
So how we're addressing that is that if there's an impending development in an area that doesn't have an established neighborhood association, then that notification has to go to the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods. And then the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods would organize a meeting with those residents so that the developer can present his or her development plans. We have just discovered that, whether it's 200 feet, 400 feet, 600 feet, whatever distance you want to make, the notifications go to property owners. There are a lot of property owners who don't live in the city of Asheville, and it's a real haphazard way of gathering people together for this developer presentation. And it's not a workable solution.
Okay, so Barbara, I'm going to let you have the last word on this. If you still have something more to add, you need to unmute. You have to unmute, Barbara. Barbara, you have to unmute.
Okay, for all the years that I've done this, which is way over 30, Mike Lewis and I can tell you from all our years of doing the neighborhood activism that we have complained about 200 feet the entire 30 years. It is, unless it has been changed and we're not aware of it in the last couple of years, the 200 feet is set for the General Assembly. And when we tried and kept pushing to get it changed, the planning department informed us in several different meetings, and this has been years ago, so they may have softened their view, that in most cities, they don't require any notification at all, and that we just better be lucky that we got 200 feet. So that's something certainly maybe we could look at it sometime, but if it's the General Assembly that sets it, it's going to take a long time to get it changed. Thanks.
Okay, let's move on so that we have some time left for others. I'm up next on what's going on with noise leaders here. And I'll try to sort of roll through this fairly quickly. The slides will be up, and we'll be publishing all kinds of information going forward. Basically, where we are with the noise ordinance is it went on hold for pandemic. It came back to life in late November. The team in the city that was trying to move that forward got lots of bad comments during their public input period, especially from businesses who are already in big trouble, hurting left and right, would be asked to make changes to their businesses to conform with an ordinance. And after a little bit of internal thought, the city decided first to just delay it. And then secondly, they decided that maybe they'd move forward to try to construct an ordinance, but they would not enact it until a later point in time after the public health emergency is over. So we try to decide what we should do. And here's an outline of the things that we needed to do. And we're going to move forward because from what we can see, the city is continuing to try to resolve problems, and we want to be on top of it. And we actually support delaying the enactment until life returns to the new normal. So we formed a team. We reached out to all the people who participated in the original noise work in 2019. For those of you who weren't busy with us at that point in time, we started working on the ordinance in parallel with the city in spring of 2019. So we reached out to those, and you can see here, we have 4 CAN board members who are part of that team, and we have 4 people from the community. And we're, under the overall guidance of the board and the direction they've set for us, we're building plans to work on these things. And we've done a fair amount of that, starting again in November. And we have some really smart people from the community who know how to make media plans. So we're putting a media plan together that would parallel what we're doing to reach out directly to city personnel, including city council members, when the time is right. We've had the opportunity to engage with the Asheville music professionals, AMP, to try to find common ground. A very significant portion of the city's draft noise ordinance paid particular attention to excess sound from indoor and outdoor music venues. And they certainly organized themselves very well to provide a lot of feedback that in some cases actually demanded that the noise ordinance just be abolished altogether. And obviously CAN wasn't going to stand for that position. So we've worked hard for the past couple of weeks and have actually managed to find common ground on a handful of things that we really wanted to get done. Probably the most important thing that was absent from the city's noise ordinance were no maximum sound levels in residential districts. Number two that was missing from the city's noise ordinance was that sound measurements, if they were going to be made, were often to be made on the site of where the sound was being produced, therefore not necessarily properly showing how noise was hurting people at their residence. And the AMP team agreed that complaints should be measured at the location of the complaint. And then finally, we had submitted a fairly detailed makeup of a commission to oversee this, to make sure that it's being enforced effectively and that it's accomplishing its goals. And that was completely missing from the city's draft. And AMP agrees completely that a cross-functional resident and business team with certain expertise required needs to be part of this, because it's not going to go smooth. Let's just face facts. You know, the places that are creating too much noise, they're going to realize that they're in trouble and they're going to need some time. And the whole measurement thing, which should be straightforward, is going to be complicated. And, you know, we need a commission that not only keeps an eye on it, but helps people solve their problems, you know, acts to get the businesses in conformance in a reasonable period of time. So we made these recommendations in written documents, and they went to the city Monday, and we're having a conference call with them on Friday, where I think appropriately they want to make sure that CAN and AMP didn't actually tell a different story, and that there's actually consensus on those key things. We didn't necessarily meet consensus on everything. The published maximum daytime sound level for the Central Business District was 75. That's what the city had published by looking at a number of places. We've said that we can't support that and that we really need it to be 70. My understanding from the documents that I read from AMP was they want 80. We decided to temporarily punt on what you do with the boundaries. So when a residential district bangs up against a CBD or a commercial or an industrial district, there's uncertainty. We've looked at numerous other city ordinances, and sometimes they favor one district over another. Sometimes they take an average of the two and say that that's what it is. Sometimes they favor whatever the lower number is. So we are proposing to put a 3-person team together from CAN and a 3-person team together from AMP and AIR, because especially when it comes to the restaurant associations, restaurants are often near residential areas, and they have outdoor seating, and sometimes they play music. And so we're going to have a special team that gets together to try to hammer that one out, because we just couldn't get there under the deadline. We also need some work on how to handle low frequency bass noise. Unfortunately, there's no good example in any city ordinances that we looked at. And so Can's position is, okay, if there's not a good reference, whenever there's a complaint and the complaining resident says it's this darn loud bass, we want the enforcement officer to take a measurement at that point in time so we can build a history of what these problems are and compare that to the DBA measurement so that we can propose changes to the ordinance going forward. One more that's tough, that's not handled anywhere, is when the noise source is actually within a multi-dwelling, family dwelling, where trying to measure the sound outside to see how bad it is wouldn't really do the job because it's coming through your floor or your ceiling or your walls. And we need to work on how to get that properly measured and what those limits should be so that those people are protected, since they make up about 40% of the total noise complaints that come through. And currently, it was beyond the scope of our collaboration with AMP. Currently, street performers or anybody speaking with amplified sound in a public setting is treated completely as a subjective. You know, does it seem like it's too noisy? That's the way enforcement would be directed to do that. And we'd like to see if we could get that back to an objective measure so that the people who want to conform can be left alone to do what they're doing, and the people who push the limits can be fined. And finally, Mike Lewis is fully aware of the work we did to put together something on vehicle noise enforcement, and all that's left in the city's noise ordinance is the state laws that indicate that you can't modify your exhaust system. And we need to take that on with the city before this thing goes final, to at least have some method for residents who are being bothered by loud vehicles to get some action from the enforcement, the noise administrator, to maybe set out to measure that at some different period of time. Because typically with loud vehicles, by the time a police officer would arrive, they'd be gone. So there's got to be another method that we can get people to pay attention to. So we'll continue to partner with AMP. We believe that two strong voices between CAN and AMP can really influence how city council thinks of this. They don't want two strong organizations yelling and screaming. So I think, negotiations will continue on some of these things, and hopefully we'll stay together enough on the overall thing that we complement each other and can get this done. We'll continue to, on the other topics, we're going to advocate for neighborhood rights, and we're going to use all methods. We'll be trying to set up calls and meetings with city council members and city management, and making that be meaningful by going to the media where appropriate. We're going to be putting education out on a regular basis about the health risks associated with noise so that all citizens can be aware. And we'll undoubtedly be calling upon neighborhoods and CAN members to join with us and add your voice to the things that we need to have in the next ordinance. And that all is going to try to happen by sometime in April. But I think ultimately, depending on how quickly we can get the city to be where we need them to be. So with that said, anybody got any questions about what we're doing on the noise ordinance? I don't see any hands. Oh, there's Sharon.
I'm sorry, I must have missed it. What is the AMP again?
Asheville Music Professionals.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, let us move on. I'm going to actually stop sharing, and hopefully Steffi will introduce herself in a second, and she will take over and share what she has to say. So you need to unmute Steffi and then we can proceed.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And I first want to say thanks also to Sam Quick for helping to get this meeting. He's on the call, I believe. Sam, you want to say hello? You got to unmute yourself, Sam. Okay. Well, I'm just going to move forward with the presentation. I'm sure that he would just mention his support for this organization and what we're trying to do. So basically, we believe that, climate change is the biggest challenge of our time. It affects everyone. And we need endorsements to try and get a particular legislation that we're trying to get done in Congress. And so we're here today to present, it sounds like you guys are working on a lot of great stuff. I really enjoyed listening in on this meeting. But this is one of them that we have to address. And we do feel this is very timely given that, the administration, the current one, is going to focus on climate change. So I quickly came from Maryland, from Ellicott City, Maryland, in fact, where they had that 200-year flood happen in the last few years. Mostly, we believe, because they started developing on mountaintops. So that river bend situation here was kind of hit home for me, because then the mountaintops aren't able to take in the water that is needed to prevent, more flooding events from happening downstream. But there was many other things involved there. But regardless, I also came from Montana. I moved here from Montana after 4 years of drought and fighting for water rights. And I lead the chapter here, as well as many national and local campaigns regarding brewers, agriculture, etc. We have 2 red lines at Citizens Climate Lobby. By the way, I put in our website for Citizens Climate Lobby the bill that we're talking about, Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, as well as the current endorsers in the chat, so you can check that out. We have 2 red lines we're trying to draw here, which is a significant emission reductions and protect low-income citizens. Whenever you look at a bill, you have to know that that bill is going to meet our reduction emissions that we need to meet the goals, right? And so I hope to have some questions at the end and ask for an endorsement by the coalition, as well as any other business owners or organizations that are here today. We also want to reiterate that, climate justice is a social justice issue. Low income and marginalized communities clearly bear a higher cost than wealthy elite communities. They do live near energy producers who tend to want to continue to pollute and pay for that pollution in some cases. Their energy costs are typically 10 times more as compared to their income for low-income people. And so we want to make sure that we do not, when we come up with a solution, that we do not burden those communities further. At CCL, we believe that climate culture requires Black and white, left and right, and everyone in between. So we need more diverse voices in our chapter, of which Sam Quick is a very diverse voice in our chapter as well. He's a local here to Asheville too. And so we have 37% of Congressional Black Caucus members have co-sponsored. Asia Pacific Caucus has co-sponsored the chair. And we have 5 main faith groups who actually have endorsed our solution or supported it. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, the Quaker Friends Committee on National Legislation, the Presbyterian Church, the Unitarian Universalist Association, Episcopal Church, United Church of Christ, and the Pope has voiced his support for carbon pricing. I'm not going to go over this slide. I think you all know what climate change is about. I'm going to pass up also what we're up against. We all know what we're up against. How long do we have? I usually ask people, but I don't have time today. How long do you know we have? And the answer is the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has said we have basically a decade to cut global emissions by 50%. And by 2050, we must get to 100% reduction in emissions. And then we have to take carbon out of the atmosphere. That is mind-boggling. And so we need a huge amount of support around the world. We need to do lots of great things, right? big things. So these are the things that whenever you look at a good climate solution, you need to be asking these questions. Does it drive large scale change quickly? Does it use incentives, meaning a carrot and a stick, not just a stick that supports choice? Because in order to remain fair and sustainable and sticky and durable, you need bipartisan support from conservatives, and they cherish choice. They also cherish the economy. So we need to be healthy for the planet, but also healthy for the economy. It is important to think about that. And then here is a policy comparison that I think is very interesting. These are the 4 options on the table, y'all. There is regulations, right? That I grew up thinking was the way to go, force the energy producers to change. But I didn't realize that that is actually a huge cost to consumers, that we pay twice for regulations because we have to pay our government to go out and regulate all these entities. And then those entities incur costs that they will pass along to us, right? So we get hit twice and we don't get the money back. And then there's a cap and trade, which they put a cap on emissions and then let these energy producers, trade emission credits. And it only addresses the energy industry, does not cover everything across the whole economy, like the things that we buy that have fossil fuels in them, similar to regulations. So carbon tax is when government puts a tax on carbon and then keeps the money. Which actually Republicans believe helps grow government. They don't like that. And then it would hurt low income and middle income communities the most. So carbon fee and dividend, we feel, is the gold standard. It actually addresses many different things. It is not the silver bullet. It's not the only thing we need. There are lots more things we need to do. But it is a huge way to actually reduce our emissions more effectively and at low cost. So what is our bill? It is Energy Innovation Carbon Dividend Act. It is the first bipartisan solution to be introduced in a decade. One of many carbon pricing bills. I think there's like 10 now, but it is effective. It is good for the people. It is good for the economy, and it is revenue neutral. This policy will plan to reduce emissions to 40% within a decade and 90% by 2050. So as you can tell, there's lots more we have to do to reduce our emissions, but it does send a big net to the economy and businesses and energy producers to change their ways and incentivize them to do so. The way it works, it's good for the people because it will improve health and save lives by reducing pollution that they breathe. It will also put more money in their pockets every month to spend as they see fit. And it will help prevent the burden to low and middle income Americans. And it's also good for the economy because it will create 2.1 million additional jobs over the next 10 years. And help with economic growth because if people have more money in their pockets, they spend it on the economy. I think someone needs to be muted there. And then it's revenue neutral, meaning the fees collected on carbon emissions will be allocated to all Americans to spend any way they choose. And the government will not collect the fee, will collect the fees and then distribute them so it won't grow government. And like I said, it will help the economy, which legislators like. So essentially, this is what it does: charge a fee on fossil fuels and return the money back. And there are 2 other things that we'll talk about here regarding the bill called a carbon border adjustment and a limited regulatory adjustment we'll get into in a moment. I do just want to share with you how much this is planned to reduce our emissions. It is going to meet those goals of fitting between the 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius rise. As you can see through the green dots on this diagram here, and the Clean Power Plan, when you had business as usual, was not actually very effective with regulations. Plus it got stuck in the courts. And unless government gives clear direction to Congress to implement, the EPA to implement regulations, we're not going to get that done because it did get stuck in the courts for that reason. And then as far as what families get paid, it could be after 10 years for a 4-person home as much as $300 a month. After 20 years, about $400 a month. Here's the hill graph that shows how every month, every year, people will get more and more, and then it will go down as we move away from fossil fuels. So it's basically a transition dividend stimulus check. And so it also shows the administrative costs are very low because it's very easy to implement. And honestly, when you talk to people about regulations works very good for certain things. But when you're talking about fossil fuels that is embedded in everything that we buy almost, as well as at the pump and everything that we do, how can you really regulate that? I don't even think there are enough regulators to do that. So putting a price on carbon will do it for you without the need to regulate. So it's much more effective, they say, as well, which is why it's well supported by economists and shows that it would help grow, good for the economy with jobs. It also, we've done a household impact study that shows how the gains from a carbon dividends approach are concentrated among those considered most vulnerable. So people with lower incomes, the youngest and the oldest, and the minorities will benefit from this because they typically have a lower than average carbon footprint. And the monthly dividend that's going back is essentially that of an average carbon footprint. So it actually will benefit 2/3 of society. And that's not just our report, but the US Treasury Department had done a report as well. And then, higher income people typically have larger houses, bigger cars, boats, go travel more. They have higher carbon footprints. They can bear the rising cost and they can bear the transition as well. So they will actually get hit harder by the fee than they will in the dividend, and they could care less about a measly dividend, I'm sure. This is the border carbon adjustment, the most complex part of this, but also very well needed because it is meant to really get other countries on board. Because when you basically assess fees in the country on carbon, it would hurt our businesses if we did not assess that fee at the border. We need to assess that fee at the border to level the playing field so that countries like China and India don't get off. And it also would encourage other countries to come on board with a carbon price because then they can gain revenue themselves and choose to do what they want with it. The IPCC has recommended an international carbon price, and the EU has recently adopted a border carbon adjustment for 2023, while Canada and other countries are discussing this as well. So basically, those countries who decarbonize the fastest will benefit more than those who don't because their goods will be less costly if they're less energy intensive, right? And then there's the limited regulatory adjustment, which is the most debatable part of this that a lot of environmental groups don't like. But what we like to impress upon people is that we're not rolling back any current regulations. We're going to keep auto mileage standards and things that regulations works well for, but pause the EPA's authority to regulate CO2 on any new regulations, which there are none because it got stuck in the courts. And what we've done is put this in the bill, Republicans did, that said if emission targets are not met, so there's a pause for 10 years. If they're not met after 10 years, Congress gives clear direction to the EPA to regulate those emissions. It's written in the bill, and then we don't have a Supreme Court problem there. So again, this kind of reiterates that regulations is more costly to consumers and less effective. The Clean Power Plan has no regulations on CO2 today. The regulatory pause enables business support because they can come on board without redundant costs to businesses. And there are 4 carbon pricing bills out of the 10 or so that have a regulatory adjustment in them. So there's a wonderful tool built here by Drew Jones at Climate Interactive here in Asheville, who goes to the COP conference and meets with Congress leaders as well as nation leaders. He's going to China soon with Kerry to show this tool. And this tool allows you to pull various levers to show what will enable us to get to our goals of 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius limit. And if you pull many of these levers, you'll see that I actually have this demo up right here. You'll see that they do very little, right? When you pull a bunch of these. So to electrify buildings or transport, it does a little bit of change. But when you pull the carbon pricing lever, and we can put in the variables from the Energy Innovation Act, it does a huge, that's the biggest lever that you can pull. It does almost a full degree in reduction of emissions. So it does a lot of different things. It also has a wealth of support from virtually all economists. 3,600 of them. This is the largest public statement of economists in history, with every economic advisor to the president since Ford on both sides of the aisle. This is their statement. It's just 5 things they say. As you can see, some very well-known names, including Janet Yellen, Alan Greenspan, etc. And they do say that to maximize the fairness and political viability of a carbon tax, all revenue should be returned back to citizens the majority of Americans would make out. There's also a lot of momentum worldwide. We were responsible for getting a carbon fee and dividend policy adopted in Canada, and worldwide there are 64 implementations of a carbon price or cap and trade. That's growing. 12 of the 15 largest nations have a carbon price, and 80% of our imports to the country have a carbon price. We are falling behind. There's a lot of good support coming out from big business in support of a market-based approach, which when they say market-based, let me remind you, that means carbon pricing or cap and trade. So you'll see from the Business Roundtable, the Chamber of Commerce, the National Academies of Science, the U.S. Commodities Futures Trading Commission, FERC, top finance trade groups. And then we're going to get into the last part of this program so I can get questions in the last 5 minutes. We are responsible for creating the House and Senate Climate Solutions Caucus, where we grew it in a bipartisan way to bring both politicians to the table in equal numbers. So if a Republican or Democrat wanted to join, they had to bring in someone from the other side of the aisle, or they could not join. And that was to discuss effective bipartisan legislation, and that's how our bill got introduced. And we hope to make more momentum with that. In the Senate, we have Marco Rubio, we have Lindsey Graham, we have Mitt Romney, we have Murkowski, all on that Climate Solutions Caucus. And there's some Luntz polls come out. He's a conservative, showing that voters do care about climate and want bipartisan solutions. A lot of youth care about it, under 40. Republicans do want a market-based solution. Mitt Romney even came out just 2 days ago with this quote, speaking to Bill Gates, of all people, to say that if he wants to get new technologies, carbon capture, etc., he needs to get a carbon price. And so this is what we do. We don't believe politicians create political will. They respond to it. We are unpaid citizen volunteers. We need more help. We need you to join us when you can. We do have a bill that we would love for you to endorse. We see that you make up many of the neighborhoods around here, which we've been trying to speak to. We've gotten Kenilworth to endorse. We've spoken to East End Valley Street, but we're having a hard time as an unpaid volunteer with a full-time job trying to reach out to these communities. And so I think being that you, I guess, represent these neighborhoods, it would, I think, speak very loudly for your support. Here is the list, the current list of endorsers we've gotten so far. As you can see, a lot of legislators, as well as 4 municipalities, including Asheville, and also the Transit Committee, multimodal transportation, a lot of construction, some finance, realtors, restaurants, healthcare, breweries, farmers, faith, distilleries, wineries, coffee shops, etc. Communities is right here. We would love to have your support. And if you are a business owner, I'll reiterate that the link in the chat, you can click on Energy Innovation Act and endorse there. It only takes 2 minutes. We would love more support and people speaking up. That's it. Any questions?
I'll just stop sharing, Steffi, so I can see what everybody's
yeah.
up to.
Sure.
People are still awake. That's a good sign. Any,
Will these materials also be on the website?
This presentation, well, no, not necessarily, no, but you know, these materials I've gathered over this 7 to 8 years I've been doing this, but I can certainly give you my presentation if you'd like, or give you a link to it in the chat.
Well, I
yeah,
think if I were to present it to my neighborhood, I'd want to be able to give them something to, a website to go to or something like that.
Yeah, and we could present for you if you'd like. We have several presenters, including a conservative that's with our chapter that can speak to conservative organizations as well.
so here's what I'd suggest.
At this time, a lot of neighborhoods aren't meeting because of the pandemic. So it'd be nice to have a place where we could suggest they go to do their own research.
Yeah, we can do a virtual presentation. We'd be happy to. But I can certainly give you a link to the presentation. Like I said, it's a lot harder to talk about this if you don't really know what it's all about. So I would, you know, if you wanted to join our meeting and we could help prepare you for that, that might be an opportunity as well.
The hope would be to allow the neighbors to do their own research into this by looking at your materials on their, you know, at their own initiative.
Sure. I can certainly give you that presentation, and that would give you everything you need, right?
If we could put that on the CAM website, that would be great.
So let me work with Steffi to see if we could put some links on the CAN website that would get to the things that are most important, and then I'll get the word out through our mailing list when that's done.
Yeah. Okay, great. Grace, is it Grace?
Yeah, hey, Steffi, it was a great presentation, and my question is, have you been in contact with our new representative for the U.S. House 11, Cawthorn?
Cawthorn, yeah, we've already met with the legislative director. We tried to have a meeting previous to him, you know, going to office. He did not show, like he apparently has not shown for a lot of meetings. But the legislative director meeting did meet with a math teacher here, Mike Hill, who used to meet with Meadows. And we've had many face-to-face with McHenry and Meadows. And we do believe we will get one with Cawthorn. He has actually said in C3 webinar that he is in support of a solution that solves the climate as well as the economy. And that, he said, is going to be a market-based solution.
Great. And you are meeting monthly still?
We do meet monthly. Yeah, I remember seeing you, Grace, at one time, right?
Yeah, still great. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Steffi?
Yes, I have one.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy Hayner. Steffi, I would like for you to put in our chat your telephone number and your email address so we can reach out to you. I have a couple of things that I'm thinking that would be very good for your presentation.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else for Steffi? Okay. Anybody else with any other? Thank you, Steffi. Thanks for all this, and let's trade email and make sure we have the right links on the CAN website so that people can get to the things that you think are appropriate, and we'll make sure that your contact information is posted as well.
And then you guys will think about endorsing at one point, make a vote.
Yeah, we'll close ranks with the board members after this. We have another meeting coming up, and we'll see where everybody stands. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other topics from the public? Any other issues or questions or feedback on this meeting would be greatly appreciated. We've worn you out. Last chance.
Thank you. It's a great meeting. A lot of
All right.
information.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody. Have a
Thank you.
Thank you.
good remaining piece of your evening.
Thank you
Have
so
a
much.
good one.